The massive crystal ship hung in space like a frozen star, its surfaces reflecting Earth's blue glow. Inside, Princess Rose stood at the observation deck, her iridescent skin shimming under the soft purple lights. Her four eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern, blinked in sequence as she watched the small human shuttle approach. The sight of such a tiny vessel amused her. "Your Highness," said her advisor, Tom, another Earth name they had chosen for simplicity, "the human diplomat is preparing to dock. Are you certain about meeting them alone?" Rose turned away from the window, her royal robes flowing like liquid metal. "They sent one diplomat. We will show them the same courtesy." She had studied humans extensively since their discovery. Such a young species, barely 1,000 years of recorded history, and yet they had already reached the stars. The docking bay filled with the standard breathing mix as the human shuttle completed its landing sequence. 2 honor guards, each nearly 9 feet tall, flanked the airlock. Their ceremonial armor gleamed, hiding weapons that could reduce a small city to ash. Rose thought the display would properly impress upon the human the power of the stellar empire. The airlock cycled, and Ambassador James Walker stepped out. Rose's upper eyes widened slightly. The human was shorter than she expected, maybe 6 feet tall, wearing a simple black suit with a blue tie. He carried no weapons, no defensive shields, not even basic environmental protection. Just a small briefcase. Walker looked around the massive docking bay, taking in the crystal architecture and towering guards without any sign of fear. Then he smiled, bowed slightly, and spoke in perfect imperial standard. "Your Highness, I bring greetings from Earth. Thank you for welcoming me aboard your magnificent vessel." Rose felt her advisor's surprise. Humans weren't supposed to know their language yet. Their surveillance had shown no evidence of such advancement. "Welcome, Ambassador Walker," she replied, switching to English to demonstrate her own preparation. "Your mastery of our language is unexpected." Walker's smile remained steady. "We believed learning your language would show our commitment to meaningful dialogue. After all, communication is the foundation of understanding." They walked through the crystal corridors, their footsteps echoing off the transparent walls. Other crew members stopped and stared at the human, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed disdain. Walker noticed their reactions, but maintained his diplomatic composure. "Your ship is extraordinary," he said, looking up at the vaulted ceilings. "The crystal engineering must require incredible precision." "Our vessels are grown, not built," Rose replied, allowing a touch of pride in her voice. "Each takes a century to reach maturity." Walker nodded thoughtfully. Different paths to the same stars. Humanity had to learn to build quickly, to adapt and improvise. Sometimes the fastest route isn't the most elegant. Rose detected something in his tone, not apologetic, but rather stating a simple fact. Her lower eyes narrowed slightly. This human was either remarkably brave or foolishly ignorant of his position. Their empire spanned thousands of worlds, while humans had barely colonized their own moon. They reached the diplomatic chamber, a vast room with walls that seemed to capture and hold starlight. A long crystal table dominated the space, with Earth visible through the transparent floor beneath their feet. Walker glanced down at his homeworld, and for the first time, Rose saw his expression shift slightly, a mix of pride and concern. "Shall we begin, Ambassador?" Rose took her seat at the head of the table, her robes automatically adjusting to the crystal chair. Walker placed his briefcase on the table and sat down. "Yes, Your Highness. Earth has prepared a comprehensive proposal for mutual cooperation and trade. We believe there's much our civilizations can learn from each other." Rose's advisor made a small sound of disbelief, quickly stifled. She understood his reaction. What could these humans possibly teach them? Yet as she watched Walker begin his presentation, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. There was a quiet strength in his manner, an unshakable confidence that had nothing to do with technology or military might. The first contact between humanity and the stellar empire had begun, and nothing would unfold quite as Princess Rose expected. The crystal conference room buzzed with tension as the Empire's High Council members filed in. Princess Rose watched them take their seats, their ceremonial armor catching the starlight. Ambassador Walker sat quietly, seemingly unbothered by the 12 stern alien faces now staring at him. "Let us begin," Rose said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of royal authority. "The Council has reviewed Earth's proposal. We find it." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Ambitious." Walker nodded, his face showing no sign of disappointment at her tone. "Ambitious is what helped us reach the stars, Your Highness." A council member named Reed let out a sound like grinding crystals, their version of a laugh. "Reach the stars. Your ships can barely leave your solar system. The Empire crossed galaxies before your species invented the wheel." "True," Walker replied calmly. "And yet here we are, sitting together as equals, discussing the future." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a simple metal object. "This is a piece of the first airplane humans ever built. From this to space travel took us less than 70 years. Rose's 4 eyes focused on the metal piece. 70 years. Her ship's crystal hull alone had taken longer to grow. "Speed of advancement doesn't equal quality, Ambassador." "No," Walker agreed, "but it shows something else. Adaptability. Humanity faces a problem, finds a solution, then improves it. We don't wait for perfection. We work with what we have." Another council member, Drake, waved his long fingers dismissively. "Your technology is primitive. Your weapons wouldn't scratch our weakest shields. What could you possibly offer the Empire?" Walker stood up and walked to the crystal wall, looking out at the stars. "Yesterday, when my shuttle docked, 3 of your crew members had to repair a damaged crystal section. They used tools that took 40 years to grow." He turned back to face the council. "On Earth, we'd call that a maintenance issue. A simple problem with a simple solution." Rose felt her advisor shift uncomfortably beside her. The human was right. Their technology was perfect, but when it broke, repairs were slow and complicated. "We're not offering you advanced technology," Walker continued. "We're offering you new ways of thinking. Different approaches. The Empire has grown comfortable, reliable, like your crystal ships. But comfort can lead to stagnation." The council chamber erupted in angry mutters. Rose raised her hand for silence, her inner eyes fixed on Walker. "You dare suggest the Empire is stagnant? I suggest that every civilization has something to learn from others." Walker pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's history. "In the last 100 years, we've faced and overcome more challenges than the Empire has in a millennium. Because we had to. Because we didn't have perfect crystal ships or centuries to solve our problems." Rose studied the display, seeing wars, disasters, and triumphs flashing by. Each crisis followed by adaptation, change, and growth. It was messy, chaotic, and undeniably effective. "Your Highness," her advisor whispered, "he's being disrespectful. Perhaps we should end this session." But Rose held up her hand again. Something in Walker's words had struck a chord. When was the last time the Empire had truly innovated, truly changed? They had achieved perfection centuries ago, but was perfection without growth really perfect? "Ambassador," she said, her voice softer now, "you speak boldly for someone whose civilization is so young." Walker smiled. "Youth has its advantages, Your Highness. Everything is new to us. Every challenge is an opportunity to learn, to grow, to become better. We don't claim to be perfect. We just never stop trying to improve." The council chamber fell silent. Rose looked down at Earth, visible through the crystal floor. Such a small planet, yet it had produced people who dared to speak truth to power, who saw their weaknesses as strengths. "Perhaps," Rose said finally, "we should discuss your proposal in more detail, Ambassador." She noticed Walker's slight smile and realized that somehow, in this clash of cultures, the human had made his point without a single threat or show of force. The Empire might have perfection, but humanity had something far more valuable, the courage to be imperfect. The first explosion rocked the crystal ship just as Princess Rose was showing Ambassador Walker the Grand Gallery. The blast shattered several crystal panels, sending rainbow-colored shards flying through the air. Without hesitation, Walker pulled Rose behind a thick column. "Status report," Rose shouted into her communication crystal. Static answered her. The ship's internal systems were down, something that had never happened before. Red emergency lights pulsed through the crystal walls. In their glow, Walker saw tall figures moving through the smoke. They weren't wearing Empire uniforms. "Your Highness," he whispered, "those aren't your people." Rose's 4 eyes widened in recognition. "Mountain people," she hissed, "from the mining colonies we conquered last year." Her guards were nowhere to be seen, probably trapped behind sealed crystal doors. The attackers' heavy footsteps echoed closer. They carried strange devices that glowed with green energy, tech that shouldn't exist in their primitive society. Walker counted at least 8 of them, all armed. "This way," Rose whispered, pressing her hand against a wall panel. A hidden door slid open. The emergency escape pods. Another explosion cut her off, closer this time. The mountain people were systematically destroying the ship's crystal core. Through the chaos, Walker heard their leader speak. "Find the princess. The Empire will pay for what they did to our worlds." Rose grabbed Walker's arm. "You must come with me. If they find you, they'll kill you too." But Walker stood his ground. "Your Highness, those escape pods, they're crystal technology, right?" Rose nodded impatiently. "Of course. Everything in the Empire is." She stopped, suddenly understanding. "They can track crystal signatures. They'll find us immediately." "Then we need a different plan." Walker looked around the gallery, his mind racing. "Your ship's maintenance tunnels, are they still made of basic metal?" "Yes, but they're tiny. Barely big enough for repair drones." "We can't." "We can," Walker insisted. "It's not elegant, but it'll work. Sometimes the primitive solution is the best one." More explosions rocked the ship. The attackers were getting closer. Rose looked at the maintenance tunnel entrance, a small hatch that would barely fit her. The idea of crawling through dirty service tunnels went against everything she'd been taught about royal dignity. "Trust me," Walker said softly. "Being alive is better than being dignified." The sound of boots on crystal made the decision for her. Rose pressed her palm against the maintenance hatch, and it popped open with a hiss. Walker helped her in, then squeezed through himself just as the attackers rounded the corner. The tunnel was dark and cramped. Rose's royal robes caught on exposed pipes and wires, but Walker seemed perfectly comfortable, moving quickly and quietly through the confined space. "How do you know where you're going?" Rose whispered. "Ships follow logic," Walker replied. "Even crystal ones. Engineering needs access to vital systems. Find the systems, find the path." He paused at a junction, listening. "They'll expect us to head for the bridge or the escape pods, so we're going somewhere else." "Where?" "The communication hub. It's probably deep in the ship's core, well protected. If we can reach it, we can call for help and warn Earth." He didn't add that if the mountain people succeeded in destroying the ship, Earth would likely be blamed, leading to an immediate war. They crawled through the narrow tunnels, the sounds of destruction echoing through the ship's crystal structure. Rose was surprised to find herself following Walker's lead without question. This human, whom she'd considered primitive just hours ago, now moved through her ship's maintenance system like he designed it. "Ambassador," she said quietly as they reached another junction, "why didn't you take the escape pod when you had the chance? You could have saved yourself." Walker turned to look at her, his face serious in the dim emergency lighting. "Because that's not how humans do things, Your Highness. We don't abandon people in need, even if they're not our own species. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "running away wouldn't help Earth-Empire relations very much, would it?" Above them, the crystal ship groaned as another explosion shook its core. The mountain people were getting closer and time was running out. The maintenance tunnel ended at a small control room deep within the ship. Walker helped Princess Rose climb down from the shaft, her once pristine robes now covered in dust and oil. Above them, they could hear the mountain people searching the upper levels. "We should be safe here for a moment," Walker said, examining the room's simple metal walls. No crystal tech for them to track. Rose watched as he studied the old-fashioned control panels. "These systems are ancient," she said. "We only keep them as backups. No one uses them anymore." "That's exactly why they're perfect." Walker's fingers moved across the manual controls. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Your people got so used to crystal technology that they forgot about these. But I bet the mountain people did too." A screen flickered to life, showing basic ship diagnostics. Rose's 4 eyes widened in surprise. "How did you know how to work these?" "Basic engineering principles are universal," Walker explained. "Look, power flows, system layouts, emergency protocols. They're the same everywhere, just dressed up differently." He pointed to a flashing red section. "The crystal core is failing. We have maybe an hour before the ship breaks apart." Rose felt fear grip her hearts. "The communication hub is still 4 levels up. We'll never make it through all those corridors with the attackers searching for us." Walker smiled. "Who said anything about corridors?" He pulled up a maintenance schematic. "These old systems control something even more basic: air circulation. Every ship needs air ducts, even crystal ones." "Air ducts?" Rose stared at him. That's beneath royal dignity." "Your Highness," Walker said gently, "dignity won't matter much if we're dead. Besides, crawling through air ducts is a proud human tradition in crisis situations." A distant explosion emphasized his point. Rose sighed and nodded. "Very well. But if we survive this, no one must ever know." They found the duct entrance behind a loose panel. Walker went first, using his phone's light to illuminate the way. The metal ducts were bigger than the maintenance tunnels, but they had to move carefully to avoid making noise. "Wait," Rose whispered suddenly. "Listen." Through the duct walls, they could hear voices in the corridor below. "The crystal core's almost gone," someone said. "Once it shatters, the Empire will know our pain." "But what about the human?" another voice asked. "If he dies, Earth will retaliate." "Earth is nothing. The primitive world. Once the Empire blames them for the princess's death, they'll be destroyed anyway." Walker and Rose exchanged looks in the dim light. "They're going to start a war," Rose said quietly. "Millions will die on both sides." "Not if we can help it," Walker replied. He pointed to a junction ahead. "The hub should be just past that turn. We just need tow." The duct beneath them groaned. Rose barely had time to shout a warning before the metal gave way. They crashed through the ceiling, landing hard in a storage room 1 level below the communication hub. "Well," Walker said, helping Rose up, "I guess we're taking the direct route now." Rose brushed off her robes, then froze. Through the room's window, she could see mountain people patrolling the corridor outside. They were trapped. "Any more human traditions that might help?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Walker looked around the storage room, taking in the spare parts, cleaning supplies, and maintenance tools. To Rose's surprise, he smiled. "Actually, yes. Humans have a long history of turning ordinary things into extraordinary solutions. Your Highness, how much do you know about basic chemistry?" Rose watched as he gathered various cleaning supplies. "Are you suggesting we make weapons out of cleaning materials?" "Not weapons," Walker corrected. "Distractions. Sometimes winning isn't about fighting. It's about being clever." He held up 2 bottles. "Now let me show you how humans handle impossible situations." The improvised smoke bombs worked better than Rose expected. Walker's mixture of cleaning supplies created thick clouds that filled the corridors, confusing the mountain people's crystal tracking devices. Through the chaos, they finally reached the communication hub, only to find it already occupied. 6 Mountain People warriors turned to face them, weapons raised. Their leader, a tall figure with battle scars across his face, stepped forward. "The princess," he growled. Finally, Walker moved slightly in front of Rose, his hands raised. "Before you do anything permanent," he said calmly, "I think we should talk." The leader laughed harshly. "Talk? The Empire doesn't talk. They take. They destroy. They turn free people into slaves." "I'm not the Empire," Walker replied. "I'm human, and humans have learned a few things about fighting against powerful enemies." He lowered his hands slowly. "We've also learned when not to fight." Rose watched in amazement as Walker took another step forward, seemingly unconcerned about the weapons pointed at him. The Mountain People's leader looked uncertain for the first time. "You want the Empire to feel your pain," Walker continued. "I understand. But killing the princess won't achieve that. It will only start a war that will destroy both your people and mine." "They deserve destruction," one of the warriors shouted. "Do your children deserve it?" Walker asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a physical thing. "Because that's who wars destroy first. Not emperors, not princesses. Children, families, ordinary people." The leader's weapon wavered slightly. "You know nothing of our suffering." "Then tell me," Walker said. "Tell us both." He gestured to Rose. "Your Highness, when was the last time you actually listened to the people your empire conquers?" Rose felt all eyes turn to her. She wanted to respond with royal authority, to demand their surrender. Instead, she found herself really looking at the Mountain People for the first time. Their worn clothes, their desperate expressions, their eyes full of pain and anger. I haven't," she admitted. "We never do." "Our mountains were sacred," the leader said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not just rocks to be mined. They held our history, our culture. The Empire tore them apart for crystals." Walker nodded. "And now you want to tear apart their ship for revenge, trading one destruction for another." He spread his hands. "Or you could show them a better way." "What better way?" the leader demanded. "The way of Earth," Walker said. "Where I come from, the strongest societies aren't built on conquest. They're built on understanding, on turning enemies into allies." He smiled slightly. "On talking." The ship shuddered around them. The crystal core was failing faster now. They all had minutes, maybe less. "You have a choice," Walker continued. "Die here, start a war, and guarantee more suffering. Or help us save this ship, start a dialogue, and create real change." He held out his hand to the leader. "What matters more, revenge or your people's future?" Rose held her breath. The Mountain People's weapons were still raised, but doubt showed in their eyes. Their leader stared at Walker's outstretched hand. "How can we trust the Empire?" he asked. "Trust me," Walker replied. "Earth will guarantee any agreement. We'll make sure your voice is heard." He glanced at Rose. "Right, Your Highness." Rose straightened her shoulders. "Yes," she said firmly. "You have my word. Not as the Empire's princess, but as someone who is learning to see things differently." Another violent shake rocked the ship. Warning lights flashed everywhere. The leader looked at his people, then back at Walker's hand. "If you're lying," he began. "Then you can always choose violence later," Walker said. "But right now, we all need to work together to survive." Slowly, the leader lowered his weapon. Around him, the other Mountain People did the same. He reached out and clasped Walker's hand. "Show us how to save the ship," he said. Rose watched in amazement as former enemies began working together, following Walker's calm instructions. The human had done the impossible, not through force or technology, but through understanding and wisdom. And somehow, she knew nothing in the Empire would ever be quite the same again. 2 days after the crisis, Princess Rose stood in the repaired crystal gallery, watching stars drift past the restored windows. The ship hummed with a new energy as Empire engineers worked alongside Mountain People technicians to strengthen the crystal core. Behind her, she heard familiar footsteps. "Ambassador Walker," she said without turning. "I thought you'd be resting." "Too much work to do," Walker replied, joining her at the window. "The mountain people have some fascinating ideas about crystal engineering. They've been studying your technology from the outside for years. Sometimes that gives you a fresh perspective." Rose nodded slowly. The past 2 days had changed everything. She thought she knew about her empire's superiority. "They're not primitive at all, are they? We just never bothered to look closely enough." "The empire got too comfortable with its own success," Walker said gently. "When you believe you're perfect, you stop looking for ways to improve." Through the crystal walls, they could see mountain people engineers teaching empire technicians how to repair crystal structures more efficiently. Their method was different, less elegant but faster and more adaptable. "You knew this would happen," Rose said suddenly. "When you refused to fight them, when you chose to talk instead, you saw an opportunity, didn't you?" Walker smiled. "Humans have learned that the best victory isn't defeating your enemy. It's turning them into friends." He gestured at the busy workers. "Look at them. They're already sharing knowledge, solving problems together. That's how progress really happens." Rose's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as she considered this. "The council is furious, you know. They say I've damaged the empire's reputation by negotiating with terrorists." "And what do you say?" "I say the empire's reputation was already damaged. We just couldn't see it." Rose turned to face Walker fully. "We thought being advanced meant being right. Being powerful meant being wise. But you showed us something different." "What's that?" "That true advancement isn't about having the best technology. It's about being willing to learn, to change, to see things from other perspectives." She smiled slightly. "Very human concepts, it seems." Walker nodded. "Earth's history taught us that the hard way. We made plenty of mistakes, but we learned from them. That's why we value diversity of thought so much. Different viewpoints make us stronger." Through another crystal panel, they watched a group of mountain people children touring the ship. They had arrived with the engineering teams, and their wonder at the crystal technology was matched only by their eagerness to share their own knowledge. "The council wants to know what Earth gains from all this," Rose said. "They can't understand why you'd help negotiate peace between us and the mountain people." "Can't they?" Walker asked. "Look around. The empire gets new engineering techniques. The mountain people get recognition and respect. And Earth." He smiled. "We get proof that different civilizations can work together, learn from each other. That's worth more than any technology." Rose was quiet for a moment, watching the children play. "I've been thinking about what you said about humanity's quick advancement, about how facing challenges made you stronger." She turned to Walker. "The empire hasn't faced real challenges in centuries. We stopped growing because we stopped having to try. And now we have a choice. Keep pretending we're perfect, or admit we can learn from others, even those we once looked down on." She straightened her royal robes. "I've already made my choice." Walker looked at her curiously. "What did you choose?" "The human way," Rose replied with a small smile. "It's messier, less elegant, and probably going to give the council several headaches. But it's also more interesting, more alive." Outside the window, a mountain person child was explaining something to an empire engineer, their hands moving excitedly as they talked. The engineer was nodding, taking notes, asking questions. "Your people have a saying," Rose continued. "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. The empire has been standing still for too long. It's time we started walking again." The signing ceremony took place in the great crystal hall of the empire's flagship. Representatives from Earth, the empire, and the mountain people gathered under the starlit ceiling. Princess Rose stood at the central podium, looking very different from the proud royal who had first greeted Ambassador Walker just 1 week ago. "Today," she announced, her voice carrying through the vast space, "we sign more than just a treaty. We mark the beginning of a new era." Her 4 eyes swept across the assembled crowd. For too long, the Empire measured advancement by the perfection of our crystal technology. We forgot that true progress comes from growth, from change, from learning. Walker sat in the front row, wearing his simple black suit among the elaborate robes and armor of alien diplomats. He caught Rose's eye and nodded encouragingly. Earth was supposed to become just another protectorate, Rose continued, another world under Empire control. Instead, they taught us something invaluable. She smiled. They taught us that we were wrong. A murmur ran through the crowd. Empire nobles had never heard a royal admit to being wrong before. The mountain people delegates leaned forward, their interest clear. Ambassador Walker showed us that strength isn't about having the most advanced technology or the biggest ships. It's about having the courage to listen, to change, and to see others as equals. Rose gestured to the treaty displayed in holographic form above the podium. This agreement recognizes Earth as a full partner of the Empire, not a subject world. It also grants the mountain people autonomy and respect for their sacred spaces. The mountain people's leader, now wearing formal diplomatic robes, stepped forward to sign. His hand steady as he pressed his palm to the crystal scanner. We offer our knowledge of crystal engineering, he said, freely given, not taken. Walker rose and walked to the podium. Earth brings something different to this alliance, he said as he signed. We bring our adaptability, our creativity, and our belief that the best solutions come from working together. Rose was the last to sign. As she did, the crystal walls of the ship pulsed with light, recording the historic moment. The Empire offers its protection and resources, she declared. But more importantly, we offer our willingness to learn and grow. The crowd erupted in applause. Even the council members, who had fought against these changes, couldn't deny the energy in the room. Empire citizens were already talking excitedly with mountain people engineers about new projects, while Earth diplomats discussed cultural exchange programs. After the ceremony, Rose found Walker looking out at the stars through a crystal window. Thinking deep thoughts, Ambassador. Just remembering our first meeting, he replied. You thought humans were primitive then. Rose laughed softly. I thought many foolish things then, but you never tried to prove me wrong directly. You showed us instead. Sometimes the best way to change minds is to change hearts first. Walker turned to face her. The real work begins now, you know. Change isn't easy, especially for an empire as old as yours. Good thing we have Earth to help us remember how to adapt. Rose's expression grew serious. The council is still worried. They think showing vulnerability will make the empire weak. Walker shook his head. Admitting you can learn from others isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength there is. Through the crystal walls, they could see ships from all three civilizations docked together. Empire vessels with their perfect crystal lines, Earth's practical metal ships, and the mountain people's hybrid designs that combine both styles. So, Rose said, what do humans do after changing an empire? Walker smiled. We celebrate. Then we get back to work. There's always more to learn, more to discover. He gestured at the stars beyond the window. And now we can explore it together. Rose nodded, understanding finally what made humans so special. It wasn't their technology or their diplomacy. It was their endless desire to grow, to improve, to reach for more while helping others do the same. Together, she agreed. That sounds like a very human way to move forward. And as they stood watching the stars, both knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than any one world or empire. It was the start of a future where differences weren't weaknesses, but strengths waiting to be discovered.